Go, go.
Praise of their nation.
And when you freed Kuwait, you uplifted the American spirit.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor, the Commander-in-Chief, United States Central Command, General H. Norman Schwarzkopf.
Unlike the Vietnam War, this one is ending with a party.
All it takes is a point of light, a ray of hope in the darkest night.
From Bob Hope's home in Palm Springs, we bring you Bob Hope's Yellow Ribbon Party.
These are the areas we'll be discussing today. Now, you probably noticed right off, we've divided Kuwait into two sections, smoking and non-smoking.
The war has become a primetime spectacular. Its heroes have joined the winner's circle.
Again, set!
The people of Delta would like to recognize the sacrifice made by our armed forces and their families.
We do have a special military fair.
Now, with our Welcome Home fairs,
Its warriors are impersonated for the bottom line.
This significant victory for our nation's business travelers was won by America West Airlines, who have reduced full coach fares up to 40% with no restrictions.
Even the military has produced its own rock video about the war.
Look into the eye of the storm. Look out for the force without form. Look around at the sight and sound. Look in, look out, look around.
I wish all the guys from Vietnam and Korea and World War II were here today. These yellow ribbons are for all of America's veterans, believe me.
This victory left America feeling good about itself. As Newsweek magazine put it, quote, the march on Kuwait turned into something akin to a Roman triumph, complete with beaming general.
This is sand from the liberated beaches of Kuwait.
Rolling engines of war, and lines of bedraggled prisoners. America, the magazine said, was seen as a giant again, its military might beyond compare, its diplomacy sure-handed, its self-confidence restored. Perhaps. But now that the Gulf War is over, we are not of one mind. The euphoria is fading. There are second thoughts.
I think it's possible that maybe the support for the troops is being mistaken for support for the campaign.
I wish we could have took care of Saddam before we came back. I really do. I wish we could have took care of him.
Left him.
Yeah, I hate that we left him still in power.
A very important point of principle has been made, that one country cannot swallow up another, which is, after all, the principle on which the whole world is supposedly based in any reasonable conditions. So I think that was very important. But I think that the great tragedies that have come of the war and so on will not be justified unless a great deal of pains is taken to look at this whole experience and try to move on to doing everything better in the future.
It is only now that official censorship has been lifted and eyewitness reports are coming in that we can look at the whole experience. Now we can learn the truth and see the consequences of the war.
You came up over that mountain ridge to where the refugees were, and you saw what at first glance looked to be lots of trash blown up against these steep mountain slopes. And you look closer and you realize that wasn't trash. These were people huddled on their blankets and strips of tents and plastic.
During the war, the Pentagon had muzzled the press and controlled what reporters could show us.
This is the main supply route.
What we saw on TV was not the war, but the official reports on the war.
This is my counterpart's headquarters in Baghdad. This is the headquarters of the Air Force, and keep your eye on all sides of the building as the airplane overflies the building and drops the bomb down through the center of the building.
The generals told us this was a clean win. They showed us carefully selected videotapes of how accurate the smart bombs were.
This has been fantastically accurate, and that's because a lot of money went into high-technology weaponry, these laser-guided bombs and a lot of other things, stealth technology. Many of these technologies ridiculed in the past, now coming into their own and saving lives, not only American lives, coalition lives, but the lives of Iraqis.
Others saw what most Americans didn't.
It was like watching pornography. You feel guilty for watching it, but you can't help but watch it. It was terrible watching that violence. And also, it was presented with a lot of euphoria and merry-go-round that we are the clever guys. We are the producers of patriots. We created all these high-tech weapons, and some journalists said state-of-the-art. And we can destroy the natives, the invisible natives, easily.
The 3 small hotels. You can see the bed has been overthrown. You can see it from there.
Did we worry during World War II about the destruction of Dresden or Leipzig? No. Afterwards, one is always so clever. This idea of a very surgical strike, no, there is no surgical strike. Then came Morocco.
Former Ambassador Robert Newman represented the United States in Afghanistan, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia. He now directs the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington.
You don't fight a war to save the enemy. You are more concerned about your own casualties than about the casualties of the other side. George Patton was a great advocate of that. It was right to bomb the bridges, to destroy the infrastructure. If we had not, then the command and control of the Iraqi forces would be more effective, and it would cost us our lives. And our lives are the principal concerns, have to be, should be, of our leaders. The lives of the enemy, well, as humane as possible, but war is rough business.
school book.
The school books?
Yeah, that's right. See, hundreds.
This one was rougher than we realized. Not until the fighting ended did the Air Force Chief of Staff reveal just how rough. 88,500 tons of bombs were dropped, but only 7% were precision-guided smart bombs. 70% of all bombs missed their targets.
Just wounded, two baby.
70%. Not even the Patriot missile turned out to work all the miracles claimed for it. During the war, the audience thrilled to its triumphs over incoming Scud missiles, vividly showered into living rooms by a wide-eyed media. When the war ended, we learned that Patriots at $600,000 a shot often failed to detonate the warheads of the Scuds they hit. And the Patriots' own debris sometimes resulted in additional damage in populated areas. We didn't see American pilots conducting a turkey shoot against retreating Iraqi troops, or the bodies of thousands of Iraqis hastily buried in sandy graves by Allied forces. Officials told us about the slaughter, but wouldn't let us see for ourselves.
There was a very, very large number of dead in these units, a very, very large number of dead.
How many dead? The general wasn't saying. The government wasn't saying. 3 months after the war, there was still no official U.S. estimate of Iraqi military and civilian deaths.
We are held together even when our world is falling apart.
Even the 378 Americans who died in the Persian Gulf were kept invisible.
How many bodies did you hide today?
When their bodies were flown back to Dover, Delaware, reporters were denied access to the base. They could cover the protests about the war, but not the casualties of the war.
I'm now going to show you a picture of the luckiest man in Iraq on this particular day. Keep your eye on the crosshairs.
The American public saw only what its government wanted it to see.
Right through the crosshairs. And now in his rearview mirror,
Death was out of sight. It might spoil the show. Others were not so lucky.
We're ready. Good. He got him. Go ahead, 1CN 223-4. Okay, we're in the spot. Roger, we are shooting Alpha missiles. Roger, Alpha missiles. Alpha good. Yeah.
This Department of Defense video, obtained by the newspaper Newsday, shows how U.S. forces of the 24th Mechanized Infantry Division destroyed an Iraqi division just west of Basra.
We're about 5 kilometers to the east. That's where we're taking the air. There's about 3 kilometers to the south. About 4 or 5 vehicles around it. And all of them ran off there, so we fired up.
Nearly half of the 7,000 troops in this Iraqi division were captured.
Shouldn't be picking up let's disregard with the Hellfires. Let's get a hit on that one? Oh, yeah.
The number killed is still unknown. Mike Ainge's National Guard unit was in the area.
We went into Basra, Iraq, behind the 24th Mechanized Infantry Division, and there was a lot of death and destruction along the roadway. There were vehicles. I actually went up close and examined 2 vehicles that basically looked like refugees maybe trying to get out of the area. You know, you had like a little Toyota pickup truck that was loaded down with, you know, the furniture and the suitcases and, you know, rugs and you know, the pet cat and, you know, that type of thing hanging all over the back of this truck, and those trucks were taken out just like, you know, the military vehicles.
Because of the news blackout, coverage was muddled. Rather than the one battle of which the media spoke, there were many separate slaughters. Neither the scale of Iraqi casualties nor the horror was made evident.
American network television reported nothing like the scenes in this documentary, The Information War, shown on Britain's Channel 4.
from Richard Dowden at Ur of the Chaldees in southern Iraq. It is, they say, where Western civilization began, one of mankind's first towns, and identified in the Bible as the home of Abraham. Standing on top of the ziggurat, the scene looked more like the place where civilization ended. To reach it, we had come through apocalyptic scenes of destruction, reminiscent of the Somme in 1916 or Hiroshima. And although the war is officially over and the Allies are going home, the dying may not be done.
Television cameras have only started to nibble at going to war. People die quickly, they die horribly, and they don't die in front of television cameras. We do not actually deliver on a screen what war does.
It's evidence of the horrible confusion and downright panic as the Iraqis tried to leave Kuwait. And those who fought and died for Iraq here turned out to be from the north of the country, from minority communities.
Television cameras did not depict the consequences of battle. Images like these were censored, first in the field, then in newsrooms. Somewhere on the road to Basra, the reality of war was lost.
It's inevitable of rather sloppy reporting of war, of the muddle of war, of everybody just sort of saying the Basra Road. It's a great long road. People were killed all along its length.
The lorries further down the line would have tried to crash off the motorway and just get away, just get off the road. And they would have chased them, and you saw them in the desert. And then you would see bodies going from those lorries. So they'd actually hunted down people who were just running away.
I talked to one guy that was a medical doctor in the Iraqi, he was an infantryman in the Iraqi army, but he was trained and licensed as an MD. And he was educated here in the United States. And he said that basically, they were all conscripts, and they were told that if they did not stay and if they did not put up a fight, that their families would be tortured and killed. And so, do those people want to be there? I don't think so.
Let me repeat. We have no argument with the people of Iraq. Indeed, we have only friendship for the people there, and we're not trying to systematically destroy the functions of daily living in Iraq. That's not what we're trying to do, or are we doing it?
Water, no electricity, no fuel.
Well, I would say that our effort, our main goal is to get this man to comply with the resolutions, but we are not trying to systematically destroy the infrastructure or to destroy Iraq.
Tell me, what happened to your father?
His leg broken, and his hand, and all face. No face. No, his lips and nose, everything.
Despite his denials, the president's strategy made the suffering of civilians inevitable. The massive air power was aimed at destroying Iraq's electric power, communications, and transportation facilities, laying waste to the country's infrastructure. When the war ended, a United Nations team went to Iraq to survey the damage. It found the country paralyzed, bombed back to a pre-industrial age. Without electricity, the report said, there was no way to preserve food and medicine, irrigate crops, purify the water, or clean up the sewage.
You can go into places like Amara and Basra and walk for blocks and blocks, almost knee-deep in liquid sewage. And it's in people's homes, obviously. It's everywhere. In some towns, even the sewage treatment plants are half a meter under water, so to speak, or under the liquid sewage level, which is what makes it very likely that there will be big epidemics. That's one of the worst aspects of the whole Iraq picture.
Richard Reed, based in Amman, Jordan, is regional director of UNICEF. He brought 54 tons of medical supplies into Iraq during the war as co-leader of a joint evaluation team for UNICEF and the World Health Organization.
Kids are not growing, have not been growing for the last 2 to 3 months, young kids in Iraq. And we're seeing also in Iraq now a couple of manifestations of hunger that you had seen only before in Africa, never in our region, never in the Middle East or North Africa. And that's marasmus, the condition that makes kids under 2 suddenly look like weazened old men, the bony face, the skull. And kwashiorkor, the malnutrition condition that turns a child's hair a rusty red and gives him a pot belly. That's unimaginable in Iraq, and yet you see it all over the place now, even in Baghdad.
And is that typical of a number of children that
Yes,
are becoming malnourished?
Many cases, yes.
In May, a Harvard University team of public health experts visited hospitals in Iraq and predicted that tens of thousands of children will die in the next year from epidemic levels of cholera, typhoid, and gastroenteritis.
The country was really pasted, and then the country did a job on itself internally with these uprisings, which went door to door, house to house, and wiped out everything. Everything.
The uprisings inside Iraq were also part of President Bush's strategy. He called on the population to rise up and overthrow Saddam Hussein.
And there's another way for the bloodshed to stop, and that is for the Iraqi military and the Iraqi people to take matters into their own hands and force Saddam Hussein, the dictator, to step aside.
It wasn't only George Bush either who asked the people to rise. There was an American-financed radio broadcasting into Iraq from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. It was a very smooth operation. The Saudi Arabians could not have announced it themselves, organized it themselves. This radio was saying in Kurdish and in Arabic to people, rise, this is your moment. This time the Allies will not let you down.
But the Allies did let them down.
Roger, we got a whole bunch of guys throwing AK-47s up the air down here. Does that mean anything? Y'all shoot them, shoot their equipment.
As the Iraqi army retreated from Kuwait in chaos, there was a rebellion inside Iraq. Several thousand Shiite Muslims in the south took up arms against Saddam Hussein and looked to America for help. But President Bush ordered the Allied army to stop fighting, allowing at least 20,000 of Hussein's crack troops, the Republican Guard, to escape. Hussein joined them with his reserves in Iraq and began a slaughter of the rebels.
Those people they're sort of forgotten almost now. They are now the main recipients of Saddam's terror. Basra is a city which was in excess of 1 million people. He leveled it. Karbala, he did the same. Najaf, he did the same. He had just went and knocked out everything that was not knocked out by the Allied bombing in the Shiite cities. They use these things in Iraq to hang people.
Ahmad Halabi, an American-educated mathematician, lives in London, where he is a member of the exiled Iraqi Democratic Opposition. When he came to Washington to lobby for support, the Bush administration turned a deaf ear.
Whenever we talked about democracy, we were laughed at. After the war started by Saddam's invasion of Kuwait, August 2nd, if you like, we would call it the phony war, between August 2nd and January 17th, there was very, very limited contact between the US and the Iraqi opposition. Extremely limited. But the Saudis had extensive contacts. And the whole idea was that really don't say that we want democracy at this stage. Just let's get rid of Saddam and talk about that later. The idea is that the United States did not encourage and did not come out with a statement supporting democracy in Iraq.
It wasn't just Washington's indifference toward democracy that angered the Iraqi opposition. It was also the president's decision to let Saddam Hussein and his Republican Guard escape.
General Powell gave an interview in which he said we plan to stay in Iraq many months to put pressure on Saddam. And in effect, the article said that he was saying that by our presence, we are helping the rebels. Then 4 days later, there was a sudden switch.
Once you get the other guy to retreat, you go and surround him and disarm him. I don't understand why we didn't do that on the ground. Schwarzkopf has said that there was a steel trap that closed, and all that remained apparently was to go in and say, okay, instead of retreating intact to Baghdad, we're going to disarm you and demobilize you. That didn't happen.
I think it absolutely was their
General Schwarzkopf later told David Frost what a few more days of fighting would have meant.
Frankly, my recommendation had been, continue to march. I mean, we had them in a route, and we could have continued to, great destruction upon them. We could have completely closed the door and made it, in fact, a battle of annihilation. And the president, made the decision that, that we should stop at a given time, at a given place. That did leave some escape routes open for them to get back out, and I think it was a very humane decision and a very courageous decision on his part also.
I felt that there was perhaps some analogy with the situation that happened in Warsaw in 1944. The Red Army arrived in Warsaw. The Polish resistance were encouraged to revolt against the Nazis. The Nazi armies and the SS put down the rebellions brutally and killed a great many people and destroyed the very forces that would have been effective in Poland. And only after they did that, did the Red Army march in. So it is that's the analogy that I was talking about. Let Saddam kill the rebels, let Saddam get rid of the rebellion, and then we'll deal with the situation later.
The terms of the truce between Iraq and the U.S. call for the grounding of Saddam Hussein's airplanes, but not his helicopters. At first, President Bush had warned Hussein about using the helicopters for combat. But when Saddam turned the gunships on the rebels, the Americans did not shoot them down.
When they said to me, we would like to fly helicopters, I said, not over our forces. Oh, no, definitely not over your forces, just over Iraq, because for the transportation government officials, that seemed like a reasonable request, and within my charter, I felt that was something that it was perfectly all right to grant. I think I was suckered, because I think they intended right then when they asked that question to use those helicopters against the insurrections that were going on.
In the north of Iraq, the Kurds, like the Shiites in the south, rose up against Hussein. He crushed them too, with troops spared by the ceasefire. Nearly 2 million Kurds fled to makeshift border camps in Iran and here in Turkey. Some 100,000 Kurds found themselves at Ishikveren, where producers Tom Casciato and Kathleen Hughes took these pictures. Here, a few hundred yards from the Iraqi border, American and other foreign aid eventually arrived, but not before the refugees had endured hunger, disease, and death. This 8-year-old boy was caught in one of Saddam's napalm attacks.
He was on the street when they dropped the bomb, and it just happened that his face caught fire.
Everyone should have known there would have been a civil war, and it would have been started with the Kurds. I feel embarrassed that Mr. Bush did not keep his word to keep the helicopters and airplanes of Saddam on the ground. I know he was under political pressure. I feel embarrassed about that political pressure. And so when I talk to these people, I don't talk to them as a representative of America. I just apologize for the mistake. It was a simple political mistake with vast consequences, and it should have been better thought out.
You speak English? No, but not bad.
Relief workers try to organize the refugees into groups in order to distribute food and water.
For the American soldiers.
Saleh Khalid, an irrigation engineer, represents 25 families. His wife and 2-year-old child were in another city when he was forced to flee. He's had no contact with them.
My father and my mother and our brother, all of them is in Mosul.
Do you worry about them now?
Yes, I am very worried about it.
Ashmir is Saleh's sister.
We
had everything in our house. We had a telephone, a VCR, we had a color TV, we had a nice bedroom, we had a living room, we had a car, we had our own paint store. Our life used to be very nice, not the way you see us in these tents. Kurds are sophisticated people. They're educated. We build our lives, we build our homes, then Saddam comes and bombs us, and we flee to live in tents. We run for our lives.
This is a diverse group. These people, there are rural people and there are urban people. Among the urban population, you've got professional people, you've got medical doctors, you've got engineers, you've got university teachers. And when they came down here, it was a shock to many of them, a real shock.
Saleh, Ashmir, and her husband and 3 children have been here 27 days, surviving on meager amounts of flour, rice, olives, and condensed milk.
The children, more of them is sick. Because when we come here, about a week, the rain is every day raining, and the snow every day is snowing here. More of them is very sick, and more of them is dead. Their future is no future, because they don't learn anything. Only you see mountains, and they play in this earth. They be very sick in this earth.
Ashmir's children are weak and have stopped sleeping through the night. Here at a hospital tent run by the international organization Doctors Without Borders, they are 60th in line this morning. They'll have to wait 5 hours in the heat before they can see a physician.
The problems with malnutrition are starting. So the first weeks, it was a problem of dehydration of the children. And then you could put some water in them and they were all right. But now, so after some weeks, the problem of malnutrition is getting worse each day. You see, for example, a child, it looks normal, it looks a bit ill, but he is getting the first signs of malnutrition here, so the swollen legs. So you have to look very good, and then you can pick out a lot of children who are starting to get problems of protein deficiency.
Have him wait back there. Sabr.
While malnutrition continues in the camp, relief agencies tackle the enormous problem of food distribution.
We're looking for...
Judge Muhammad?
No, not Judge Muhammad. You're with Hussein Abdul Karim, right?
No, I am not with this group.
You're with Judge Muhammad?
Yes, I am with the group Judge Muhammad.
is tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
There's been a mix-up. Now it's up to Saleh to tell over 200 people they will receive no food ration today. The aid shipped to the Kurds in Turkey has been estimated to cost $1 billion, much of it from America. Many of the refugees are grateful for American aid, but at the same time, they fault the U.S. for pulling back its forces while Saddam Hussein was still strong enough to take his revenge.
If we had stayed home in Iraq, 700 or 800 men and women and children would not have died over the last 20 days. If we had been at home, my daughter wouldn't have died. We have medicines, we have doctors there. We came here in the cold and the snow, and we starved to death. When the Gulf War broke out, we thought it would cost Saddam Hussein his head. We said that George Bush would chop his head off, and then we could relax. Well, we didn't relax. It has gotten worse.
For the Kurds, the bitterest irony is that they responded to George Bush's call for an uprising, believing America would support them to victory. In fact, by mid-March, they controlled over half of Kurdish Iraq and thought their freedom was at hand.
كإمرو سربرزية لشاري كويل وقرتني مقري فيالقوا فرقي جيش وكن سيران وابوكر فيش ملقوا جماوار هيرشان وابر.
Journalist Frank Smythe was there with a camera.
In the sense of popular support, it was a very moving experience to be there, and certainly the Kurds had suffered for decades, and we were there at a time when they're really at their peak. And for the first time, the entire population, civilian and rebel, were really tasting the spirit of liberation and really feeling quite triumphant. People would dance in the streets at one point in front of a hospital in Dahak. A group of rebels joined with a group of nurses and began a folk dance in the street.
Hello, where are you going?
Thank you. To war.
To war. Against who?
Against the enemy.
Saddam Hussein, is he the enemy?
Yes.
Yes? Uh-huh. And are you going to win?
Yeah, we go to win.
Yeah?
And to smile.
And to smile?
Yeah.
They were using mortars in the beginning, something which is really effective if you're attacking a fixed army base, but it's really not effective if you're attacking mobile army units. And they really hadn't thought through what to do when the tanks come, what to do when the helicopters come, and what their line of defense would be other than to rise up and say, long live Kurdistan, and go out and charge an Iraqi tank armed with merely an AK-47.
And with that, you're going to defeat Saddam Hussein?
Yes.
People were speculating on how much time Saddam had left, and the spectrum ran from 2 months to as short as 2 days.
People were wrong, and what happened next proved disastrous. While the U.S. held its fire, Saddam Hussein turned his surviving army on the Kurds. Terrified, they fled any way they could. Hussein's helicopters pursued and strafed them.
We will not interfere in Iraq's civil war. Iraqi people must decide their own political future.
I hate Bush, I hate everyone, because they make us to suffering this.
George Bush and Saddam Hussein.
George Bush repeatedly said he didn't want to intervene in the internal affairs of a sovereign nation, but he has ignored that principle when it suited his purposes. He intervened in Panama to oust Manuel Noriega, in Nicaragua to arm the Contras. Why not in Iraq? Well, the president's defenders said that the U.S. couldn't impose democracy, but we did precisely that in Germany and Japan after defeating them in World War II. No, what guided the White House this time was not concern for democracy, but for stability and for access to oil. The argument was that if the rebellion in Iraq succeeded, the country might split apart. Iran, Turkey, and Syria might fight over the pieces. The Shiites and Kurds struggle for autonomy might incite revolt in neighboring countries. The thinking went, better we let the rebels lose than risk upheaval in Baghdad. It was not the first time that the Kurds were betrayed to power politics by an American government. In the early 1970s, President Richard Nixon and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger armed the Kurdish guerrillas in their struggle for autonomy in Iraq. Oil was one of the reasons. America's oil-producing ally in the Gulf, the Shah of Iran, was threatened by neighboring Iraq. The American government hoped a civil war would distract Iraq from its larger ambitions in the region. An American congressional committee, the Pike Commission, later found that Washington had never intended that the Kurds should win. The commission said, quote, "Documents in the committee's possession clearly show that the President, Dr. Kissinger, and the Shah hoped that our clients, the Kurds, would not prevail. This policy was not imparted to our clients, who were encouraged to continue fighting." Iran and Iraq agreed to a temporary truce in 1975, and the U.S. need for supporting a rebellion disappeared. The Kurds were abandoned. Saddam Hussein, then internal security chief, began a bloodbath. Thousands of people were killed. Thousands of villages were reduced to rubble, their inhabitants made homeless. Many of them were resettled in camps run by the Iraqi police. British journalist Gwyn Roberts, who made this film, has covered the Kurdish resistance since 1974.
Within the space of a few weeks, aid was withdrawn from the Kurds, and it was withdrawn so cynically and so abruptly that these people who thought that they were fighting for their futures, for their children, for some semblance of independence or autonomy within Iraq, were left totally bereft. People were executed. They declared amnesty, but they disregarded it in many cases. Families really suffered.
Hussein's suppression of the Kurds and other opponents continued for the next 15 years.
They had all forms of torture. They'd nail people to the wall by their ears.
What are those on the wall?
That's an ear nailed to the wall, and you can see the skin.
They'd manacle them to long bars in the pitch black. They crucified them, driving nails into their hands. There were shots of children who'd been executed at the stake. We saw various pictures like that. One little boy came up to me and told me that he'd found a roll of negative on the floor of El Aman HQ, had it processed at a local chemist, and he was just showing them to me, and these were actual pictures of one individual who'd been tortured to death and shot from various angles, so that it would go in the file and be sent off to Baghdad as proof that the case was now concluded.
Hussein's violence against his people was well known and documented, yet the U.S. and others kept supplying him with bank credits, technology, and weapons. Mirage aircraft from France, tanks and Scud missiles from the Soviet Union, and the raw materials for chemical weapons from companies in Germany, Great Britain, and the United States. The U.S. tilted toward Iraq in its 8-year war with Iran and continued to support Hussein even after what happened in 1988 at Halabja. There, Hussein put down a Kurdish rebellion with poison gas.
At the time, they said 5,000 people were dead. It's possible, because the remains of people are still being found in the cellars in Halabja, that maybe 10 or even more thousand were actually killed in that one attack.
Despite a U.S. ban on military exports to Iraq, the Reagan and Bush administrations continued to license the export of materials to Hussein's government that could be used in conventional, chemical, and biological warfare. As late as last year, before the invasion of Kuwait, President Bush resisted efforts in Congress to impose sanctions against Iraq and to condemn Hussein for gross violations of human rights. American policy was helping to turn Saddam Hussein into a Frankenstein's monster. It was just a matter of time before he would turn on his benefactors.
Saddam Hussein's record as a head of government, or previously when he was prime minister, or even before that when he was just a simple gangster wielding a gun, should have been known to the West and to the United States, because this is a man who had made deals with them commercially, militarily, technology-wise. He is the man who had been given every kind of aid, economic, military, security, weapon-wise, you name it, and he had gotten it from the West.
As director of the CIA, vice president for 8 years and president for 2, there was no way George Bush could not have known what kind of man Saddam Hussein was, or what he was doing to his own people. Yet it was only after the dictator invaded Kuwait that Bush made Hussein a moral issue.
We're dealing with Hitler revisited, a totalitarianism and a brutality that is naked and unprecedented in modern times. And that must not stand. But remember, when Hitler's war ended, there were the Nuremberg trials.
But there have been no war crimes trials this time. Saddam Hussein survives. It's as if at the end of World War II, the Allies had stopped at the Rhine, leaving Hitler in power, with the Gestapo intact and the death camps running.
Do you think that Saddam Hussein will forget what has happened? One of the things about him is that he really bears grudges. Now, he's also prepared to pull back and comply. But if you think, for example, that chemical and biological weapons will simply be destroyed, they've been hidden all over Iraq. If you think that he will give up, wanting to be the leader of an Arab world, you will be terribly mistaken.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
So with Hussein still in power, what are we celebrating? The bravery of the troops, to be sure, and their general's leadership. They did liberate Kuwait.
We went halfway around the world to do what is moral and just and right. And we fought hard, and with others, we won the war.
Please welcome our coalition partners: Argentina, Australia, Bahrain.
If the celebrations seem forced, it's because the fruits of victory have not all been moral, just, and right. The New World Order looks very much like the same old thing. In Kuwait, while the country lay devastated under the pall of black smoke rising from burning oil wells, the U.S. Corps of Engineers rushed to restore the Emir's palace. The royal family returned from exile, still delaying hopes for democracy in Kuwait. The government is a monarchy and wants to stay one.
Our view on Kuwait is that having fought to regain Kuwait, that we ought to have a much more humane policy towards refuge and asylum and protection of human rights there. Clearly there's a problem, and clearly the Kurdish situation has tended to divert attention from that. But I hope that we get back to looking at basic minimal human rights decencies being practiced by a government that all of the coalition forces struggled so hard to liberate. It would be an ironic ending to end up with a repressive Kuwait at the end of the road here.
Saudi Arabia remains an oligarchy of royal princes. Women are not even permitted to drive. There is no free press, and religious police enforce strict fundamentalist laws. The New World Order includes America's embrace of an old dictator, Hafez Assad of Syria, a country officially condemned by the U.S. as a terrorist state.
We're only going to solve it provided there is genuine desire on the part of all parties to the conflict for true reconciliation.
The Arabs and Israel continue to frustrate Secretary of State James Baker's search for peace. Yet soon after President Bush called for new controls on the Middle East arms race, his administration announced that it is stockpiling substantial weapons in Israel, sending Jerusalem more fighter planes, and selling attack helicopters to the Gulf states. And in the most perverse return to the status quo, the remnants of Saddam Hussein's army are back as a power in the region. So for the arms makers and arms dealers, the New World Order means business as usual.
What we've seen on television about the Gulf War, the marvelous way the weapons worked, everybody wants some.
On guard.
It's like any other form of advertisement. You are shown a product which works whiz bang, and you say, oh, this is good, I want it.
I was brought up in the 1920s on the idea of the merchants of death, who were supposed to have caused World War I. These were arms manufacturers. Well, these people this was kid stuff by comparison to what goes on now. And I wonder, I think it's the biggest single question.
Sir Brian Urquhart has spent much of his life as a troubleshooter for the United Nations. He's retired now as Under-Secretary General. I talked to him about some of these issues, including where Saddam Hussein got the weapons he used against Kuwait.
Well, he got it certainly from the Soviet Union and France in terms of actual weapons. He got a great deal of help from the British and the United States in terms of technology, and a lot of other countries as well, not to mention China.
What does that tell us? That several members of the Security Council, which voted finally to repel him from Kuwait, had actually helped him get there in the first place.
It tells us that money talks, don't you think?
In one unshakable unity of determination to find a way to end war.
46 years ago, when I joined the United Nations at the end of World War II, it was commonly believed that governments, if they cooperated, could control the forces that are shaping the future. I'm not sure it was true in 1945, and it sure as hell isn't true now. The forces that are shaping the future are way out of control of most governments, even the most powerful ones. I mean, the agenda we ought to be considering is what we're doing to the life support system of the planet itself, which is horrendous, what we are doing to the natural resources of the planet. We're spending them as if there was no tomorrow, and what on earth the succeeding generations are going to live on.
What you're doing is asking for a new definition of security.
Well, I think this is absolutely correct. I mean, security traditionally means an absence of conflict, but now it means the capacity to survive.
It is what we do now, after the war, that concerns people seeking a new and larger agenda. Our energy policy is of particular concern to Robert Borisage of the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington.
Well, the president made a decision, on his energy policy coming out of the war that we were going to remain reliant on imported oil. We pay a lot for imported oil. The Japanese probably pay $21 a barrel these days, something like that. We pay $21 a barrel plus $60 billion a year in military forces to enforce order in the Middle East. And if we had an energy program that said, we're going to be serious about conservation, we're going to attempt to find alternative fuels and develop different energy arrangements, this country could easily be energy independent. And with energy independence, then all of the turmoil in the Middle East becomes something that we're concerned about, that we want to be part of a collective response to, but that we are not economically threatened by. What upsets me is the lack of political leadership, either from the White House or from the opposition, willing to tell the people the truth and to talk about the real problems facing the country.
And the truth is?
The truth is we need to change our course dramatically. We need to get our own house in order, and we need to change our priorities and invest at home.
What do you make of the bumper stickers that say, "We're number one and don't you forget it"?
Well, I think the bumper stickers reflect the insecurity of the country. This is a country that is in increasing trouble internally, increasing inequality, increasing national debt, cities that are collapsing, schools that don't work. And so that assertion, we're number one, don't forget it, is in part an attempt to look past the day-to-day troubles and grab onto something that's positive.
There is a point when you cannot walk away, when you have to stand up straight and tall and mean the words you say. There is a point you must decide.
Americans rejoice that their troops are coming home. For these returning soldiers and their loved ones, this war has a happy ending. But for the victims of Saddam's cruelty and American policy, the suffering continues. The camp in Ishikveran is closed now. The refugees have been moved inside Iraq, protected for the moment by American soldiers. Once those soldiers are pulled out, these people will again be at Saddam Hussein's mercy. If he respects their rights, it would be the first promise he has kept. For us, the war is over. For millions, it isn't. Only by remembering them can our celebration be tempered by the truth. No war is clean. Every victory is someone's horror. The least we owe them is our grief. I'm Bill Moyers.
Funding for this program was provided by Mutual of America and its family of companies, and by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, a catalyst for change.
This is PBS.
For a transcript of this program, send $4 to Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007, or call 212-227-READ.
The Magic Flute. The Metropolitan Opera presents David Hockney's vision of Mozart's luminous fairy tale. Join us when the Metropolitan Opera presents The Magic Flute.
Channel 3's Tuesday night prime time is underwritten in part by the law firm of Michael Foster, PA, located on the corner of Beta Bay and Dale Mabry. By HCA L.W. Blake Hospital, located in Bradenton. And by Adams Mar Caribbean Gulf Resort, Clearwater.
American Playhouse presents Triple Play 2, 3 short films by new directors. Peacemaker stars Lucas Haas and Jeffrey DeMunn. Getting under your desk in the 1950s seemed like a good idea, but it didn't make the bomb go away.
I didn't understand it. I knew what he was doing was important.
In astronomy, Hector Elizondo runs a seedy trailer park where an enterprising young girl creates a fantasy world in the night sky.
Wish, We sent it to space. How just like I was there.
And in The Price of Light, we travel to the future, where time is the universal currency. Spend wisely
15 seconds.
or die young.
10 seconds. 5 seconds.
Friday night at 9 on Channel 3.
WEDU, Tampa, St. Petersburg. The following program contains language which may be considered adult in nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Next on POV, Absolutely Positive.
I've never gone to a bathhouse. I wasn't sleeping with 8 bazillion guys. I mean, so I shouldn't be touched by AIDS.
I finally got what I've wanted all my life, and I'm going to be really pissed off if it gets taken away.
I haven't told my friends yet. I'm going to tell them by the time this gets out.
I'm afraid of dying, you know. That was one thing I didn't want to face up to.
You actually do know what you need to do and what you don't have to do. And I think that your life is going to be a help to somebody.
11 men and women face the reality of living with the AIDS virus.
It's my right to be less than perfect. It's my right to be HIV positive.
Major funding for POV has been provided by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Arts, and viewers like you. Additional funding for this program was provided by the Dayton Hudson Foundation, Kaiser Permanente, the Ittelson Foundation, the Gerbode Foundation, Wells Fargo, and the Chicago Resource Center. Peter Adair, director.
I think there are 2 reasons I made the film. One is that it was a film that obviously needed to be made. People need to understand what HIV is. But I think, to be honest, another reason I made the film is, as a storyteller, I recognized a good story. Your life changed when you hear the news that you may die of a disease. That's the premise. What happens when you ask 11 people what they're going to do with their lives after they hear that their lives may be very shortened? So, a priori, this was a good story.
I think that people chose to tell us their stories, for one thing, because they had been living, many of them had been living with a secret for so long, and they had reached a point where they decided, you know, what is there to lose? There is a lot to be gained. I know that people who began telling their stories felt a kind of relief that the secret and the burden was finally lifted to some degree, that this would have consequences. It may have great consequences for them in terms of their neighborhoods, their churches, their workplaces, for them to come forward this way, but there were other gains to be had.
This program is a co-presentation with KQED San Francisco.
I've been making films for 30 years. My movies have always been a way of exploring subjects of personal interest. When I wondered about religion, I made a film about it. When I realized I was gay, I made a film about it. When I worried about the bomb, I made a film about it. This has become a very expensive form of therapy. A while ago, I tested positive for the HIV virus, and my doctor told me this means the chances are very strong. I'll get AIDS sometime in the years ahead. I was confused because nothing had changed, yet everything had changed. I decided to make a film about it. The nice thing about having a serious disease is that it's okay to say anything you want, and people put up with it. I don't know if it's because they feel sorry for you, the extra cake at the birthday party because you've been sick syndrome, or because they think since you're facing death, you're somehow automatically wiser. Both attitudes should be encouraged, however. I asked Janet Cole if she produced the film, and we started talking to people. The government says there's more than 1 million Americans infected with HIV. We did research interviews with 120 of them. What a strange disease. You're sick, meaning you have a deadly virus, but you're well, meaning you probably don't feel sick. I wanted to know, how are people handling the news? Has being positive changed their lives? How afraid are they of getting AIDS? We eventually chose the stories of 11 men and women who represent a cross-section of the epidemic. As most everybody knows by now, AIDS was first identified in this country as an illness affecting gay men. And as gay men, we were part of a community which itself was young, a community formed from the new sexual awakening in America.
I came out to my parents when I was 13. They were the first people I told. And it gives you an idea of how close we were. I mean, this was a very tightly knit, dysfunctional group. It was, you know, not, and I have very strong positive feelings toward my parents along with strong negative feelings. But they were the first people I told, and they wanted to be helpful, which meant that they wanted to seek the appropriate medical counsel. And so we went to my family physician, and he recommended a child psychologist. And I came out in that context to my family. I stopped going to the psychologist after a couple of years. I felt it was a gross waste of money and time. And
he didn't cure you?
No, no.
I grew up in upstate New York. We lived on an old, what used to be a chicken farm, but it wasn't operational for years. My father was a truck driver. I have 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters, and the family joke is that I'm the transition.
Gay men flocked to the big cities to be part of this new community.
I wanted to, you know, own more real estate in Manhattan than Donald Trump, and my.
You can remember actually wishing that.
Yeah, and now I think back about it and laugh. It's so contrary to how I feel now.
Not big steps, they're gradual steps. I mean, I went about all of this very, very slowly. What was so liberating was the presence of this entire gay community and gay culture and bars and bookstores and, you know, a street that you could go out and sort of walk and look at people, look openly at people that you found attractive. I mean, it didn't mean that you had to do something with them every time you looked, but it was just a joy to be able to, as so many of our heterosexual brothers can, look at someone and just notice and admire, to be able to do that.
They were exuberant times. We were celebrating our newfound pride and freedom. There was a lot of sex back then and a great sense of kinship. And this process of coming out, of finding other gay people, is still happening.
I'd go on the Castro and I'd feel like this bond between all these people, you know. They're walking around going, oh, you know, going on with their lives. I'm gay, nothing, no big deal, you know. It's a part of my life, you know, so what? And I'm here going, wow, you know, a gay book, gay literature, you know, and reading it. And I just felt so free, you know.
I remember the same exhilaration 25 years ago, but for Johnny, there was a big difference. When he, at 17, discovered the gay community, the virus was already there.
I still had in the back of my mind, I only had unsafe sex those few times. There's a slim chance, no. And plus, I'm not sick. I don't have any marks on my body. I haven't been very ill. There's no way. I'm pretty sure I'm negative.
What an irony that the liberation movement, which freed so many, also created such opportunities for transmission of a virus.
I don't even know what year this was that I actually, but I think my very first experience was I was coming out of the Castro Theater, and my friend said, "That guy with the brown jacket has AIDS." And I remember this total fear coming over me, and just a lot of fear. And they introduced us, a group of people, to one another, and the guy with AIDS made his point to shake hands with everybody there. And I remember it was my first time meeting somebody with AIDS, and the fear, and I didn't want to touch him. I didn't want him to shake my hand. And so I put my hand in my pocket, and I waited till we got to a restaurant so that I could go into the washroom. I felt so sad and so guilty. That someone who was in a place of needing so much compassion and so much understanding, that I wanted to run away and I didn't even want to touch him. And I remember thinking, God, this guy is so beautiful and so powerful, the way he put his hand out to everybody. And I thought, I wonder if he knows what I'm thinking. I wonder if he knows what I'm thinking. I wonder if he knows how afraid I am.
As time progressed, we found out more and more about how AIDS was transmitted, and I had had unsafe sex in the early 80s up until about 83 in New York, including passive anal sex without condoms, and assumed that I was probably exposed.
I was in Germany a year ago about this time, actually just right after Christmas, and suddenly became very ill. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, sweating, chills, vomiting, bathroom, everything, just sort of violent. Was visiting my family at that time and went to the hospital, and they diagnosed kidney failure. Both kidneys had failed. Still don't know why. I asked immediately, is this HIV related? When I was in the hospital, still in my sort of shocked, dazed state, because I was on dialysis and all kinds of drugs. And they say, we don't think so, but we've tested you, and you're positive.
About a year ago, I was in the bathroom, and I was brushing my teeth, and I noticed something on my tongue. It was very, very little. It was on the side of my tongue, but I hated it. Okay, I took one look at it and I couldn't stand it, and I got really upset. And I went to a very good friend of mine with whom I had worked, closely and affectionately for years. And I said, listen, do me a favor, come in the other room. I have something I want you to look at. And I showed him the side of my tongue, and the expression on his face. He had a bad expression on my face when I asked him if he wanted to look at my tongue. But when he saw what was on my tongue, he had a very, very disturbed expression on his face. The oh fuck expression.
He looked at me and he said, in a very soft voice, because I knew it was rough for him. I don't know how these counselors do it. You are positive. And then I felt this it was like the feeling of getting an F on the report card, like you did something bad and you're really gonna pay for it, rush of being scared. And then I didn't know a whole lot about AIDS, so I thought I was gonna die in a month. The thought of dying that's not what made me cry, and I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because I was predicting the pain my friends and family would have when they find out, and and the pain the fact is going to cause them. And that made me cry. that made me feel really bad.
Did your mother or your brother ever wonder why that you were acting strange? Or
I kept it pretty hidden, they didn't even notice any change in my mood or anything. Neither did my friends.
So you didn't tell anybody that you knew?
No.
And when's the first time, I gather you still haven't told your mother?
No. No.
I grew up so Catholic, I mean, I was doing it so right, Janet, that I had never been to a gay porno movie. I'd never seen a gay porno movie, even on a video. I'd never gone to a porno house. I've never gone to a bathhouse. I wasn't sleeping with 8 bazillion guys. I mean, so I shouldn't be touched by AIDS. You know what I mean? Like, this is the level of thought that was going on in my mind. I think that goes on for a lot of people around when they're diagnosed. Oh, it's because of that evil stuff I did in the bathhouse. It's because this and this and this. And so what I love telling people when I hear all that loaded guilt stuff, I said, look it. I feel like I'm like Andy of Mayberry, and I am diagnosed HIV positive. I mean, cut yourself some slack. I was about as angelic and white bread as you can get. So I thought. I mean, I was doing it right. You know, my idea of love was 2 people in a room with the windows closed, and there's 2 people in that bed, and they're going to be together forever and ever. I'm HIV positive. What happened?
These stories all had a familiar ring because they are my story. We all shared the 2 biggest events of our lives, coming out and testing positive. It's estimated that 50% of the gay men in San Francisco are positive. The epidemic is also rooted within another population which evolved in the mid-60s. Drug use skyrocketed during the Vietnam War. The greatest effect was in the inner city.
Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, Williamsburg. I was born in the Greenpoint Hospital, 1952. I come from a family of 6 women, including myself, no brothers. I went to school in Williamsburg, straight to high school.
At 14, Alice got pregnant and moved in with her boyfriend.
He went to work, and I went and I hung out around the high school that I had attended, and that's how my day would go. And I would run home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to be this grown-up, you know, and cook dinner and act like I was being a housewife all day, and it was like real confusing, and it was like really, I was doing something I really didn't want to do and didn't know how to do.
Within the year, Alice began using heroin.
I got a habit, and I became my best customer. And then I became my only customer, and the relationship came to an end, and then I wasn't able to work because I didn't have it like that to work. I would get up in the morning, and it was about hitting the cooker, you know, and chasing that drug.
I was an IV drug user at the time, and it was discussed among people in shooting galleries. You know, everybody would discuss AIDS and how you got it. Although the information was real sketchy, we knew about it, but it never curtailed any of the behavior at all.
Well, how was it talked about?
It was just, you know, have you seen so-and-so? They don't look good, you know, they look really sick. Maybe he has AIDS. You know, they're saying you can get it from needles. We should use bleach, ha, ha, ha. You know, nobody ever did. And it was generally, you know, you'd see somebody and they looked really bad, or you'd hear about somebody dying, you know, and then the rumors would start whether or not it was AIDS.
It's not, there's a stereotype as to who has it. Has it, well, that's tacky. You know, who tests positive, and who has acquired this disease. You know, I mean, I'm like, I think I represent a fairly average group. You know, I'm black. I have a husband, kids. You know, we thought we were pretty average, go to church every Sunday, and through the week, we work, we call ourselves, but, you know, we had a bit of a history that we thought was behind us, which a lot of people probably might think. And we had all but blacked it out of our minds because, you know, life had completely changed in the last 6, 7 years. So what do? You block it out, but who's to say that it's going to come back and haunt you like that? That's what I call it. I went in to get my results, and he told me, you know, are you ready for this? I said, everybody, but as ready as I'm ever going to get, and I thought it was about the coolest thing. And he told me your results came back positive. And he told me, well, I suggest that you get involved in some type of group. And he started telling me a bunch of stuff. I don't really know what the hell he was telling me. I know he was telling me a lot of things that were good for me, but I wasn't listening to any of it, you know. My focus wasn't that I was positive, and I guess that I was going to die. I think that was like my biggest concern, but I couldn't feel it, you know. And on my way back to the facility that I was in, I was riding in the van, and we were taking the bloods back to Bellevue, and then the van was going to drop me off at the facility, and I was thinking how I was not going to tell anybody that I had gotten a positive result. Nobody needed to know. You know, if I told anybody, I was going to have to sit in groups and talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it.
I called up everybody I had been sexually involved with in the last couple of years, and I told them, you know, that I was positive, please go get tested. I got really good reactions from everyone except my ex-husband, who refused to believe it, said it was because I hung out with gay people. I mean, he believed that, you know, I had this, that I probably definitely had given it to him, that I would probably be dead in a year. You know, that was his feeling, and that's how he reacted to it, which was like pulling back, refused to have any kind of sexual relations with me.
Even sex?
Oh, no, not at all. Nothing. And, you know, basically talking about how he'd make the last year really nice. And I kind of bought into it for a while until I realized that if all I have is a year, I'm not going to live it like this.
A year later, Mary met her current husband, Billy.
I think what he thought...
This epidemic has brought together eclectic groups of people whose names seem to have been pulled out of some kind of celestial hat. If you got a transfusion sometime in the late 70s or early 80s, there was no way of knowing that your name had been placed in that hat.
He'd gotten a letter from the hospital where he'd had the surgery 3.5 years, almost 3.5 years later, informing him that he possibly had gotten contaminated blood, and if he would like, he could come to the hospital, and for $16, they would run the tests to verify. How nice of them.
Yeah, I went to my doctor finally, and he told me, he said, oh, don't worry about it. He said, I've done hundreds of these tests, and only 2 of them come back positive. And then when he got mine back, that was 3.
Because Margie may have been sexually infected by Delmar, she decided to get tested.
I don't know where the devil Delmer was, but somehow I got in the house first, and it just so happened that 3 of my kids were here. And I came in the house saying, you're never gonna effing well believe it, but I'm dying. And that's how I informed them.
Why do you think you, you know, some people's reaction might be to keep it quiet and sort of go into themselves rather than blurt it out to their children or something. Why do you think that was your reaction?
I think probably because I'm an angry person.
Juan was also infected by a heterosexual partner.
When I met her, she had stopped. She had about 4 years without using. You know, she was in good health, except for minor, things.
Juan's wife, Grisela, had an early history of drug use. Neither had any idea that she was left infected. While Juan was serving in the Army, he was notified that she had suddenly died back in Puerto Rico.
I went downstairs to the morgue. The guy didn't want to let me see her. My uncle was there, and 2 of my uncles, my mother. So what I did was I just pushed through him. And I went up to the refrigerator door, and they had a glass, and I looked through, and it was her, you know, she was laying there. Remember her hair, you know what I mean? The blanket, you know, she was real skinny. And I turned around and the guy walked up. And he says, you know, he looked at me and I said, where's her book? Where's the book? You know, and he says, you're looking for Grisela and all this other stuff. And I said, yeah. So when he showed me her name, right next to it, it said cause of death. And it had large, like with a highlighter, you know, AIDS. That's why.
Juan returned to the base in Germany, where he tested positive.
He comes home as a, quote, healthy baby. He begins to get sick. You know, he came home in March. He began to get sick in August.
Doris had no idea she was positive when she gave birth to his son, Jared. The baby was constantly sick, but no one could figure out why. He had tested negative for HIV once, but in desperation, the doctors tested him again.
He had been at the doctor so much and been so sick that I never needed an appointment at that point. When we would come, we'd just go in. We'd go there, and the nurse put us in a room, and the doctor would be in like a few minutes. No matter what he was doing, he'd come see Jared because he knew he'd probably be real sick. This particular day, this dude didn't come in for like 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm like, you know, what's up? You know, what's taking him so long? So my husband gets real quiet. He's already quiet, but he gets real quiet. And he said, what do you think is up? So he said, you think something happened with that test? I said, no, the 14 days been up. So when we go, we sit back. He's just busy. And then we get a knock at the door, and he had a social worker with him. And when I saw this social worker, I said, help me, Jesus, because I know what the deal is. You know, that was really the hardest time to deal with then. And he really didn't have to say a lot. And he knew he didn't. Anyway, so.
Tell me what he said.
He said, you know, Jared, I got Jared's test results back. And me and my husband looked at each other. And when my husband turned, I think, and faced the wall, I'm trying to remember, I can't remember. And I just fell down on the chair, said, but you know, that's the only time. And look at me now, and I'm sitting there saying, that's the only time, but look at me now. That's the only time I really fell apart about it. I remember that. And you know, it might be hard to believe looking at me right this second, but when I think about that particular moment, that's the only time that really hurts a whole bunch. We didn't tell our daughter. And we decided on the way home we made this pact. Wasn't nobody gonna know, you know, because people will hate us.
Months later, tests would confirm that Doris was positive and her husband negative.
So, I mean, we made a real pact about that.
I know I have HIV, but I don't realize it. Experts agree that it's important to do something to slow down the virus as soon as possible. The only concession I've made to the disease is that I'm taking AZT and doing Chinese herbs. I'm having trouble accepting that HIV is now a part of who I am. Growing up, misfortune was always over there. Those poor starving people in India. Or the neighbor's daughter born with 3 fingers missing. And that crazy lady who lives across the street. But now it's not over there. It's in here. So everything has changed. Yet, most of the time I catch myself thinking, oh, those poor people who are going to get AIDS.
You like applesauce, Izzy? Easy to digest? Okay. If your sister came, would you stay in bed today? What?
What'd you say?
I said, if your sister came, you wouldn't stay in bed.
Why not?
Because she would beat the hell out of you. She would knock you on the head. Huh? What do you think? You want to try to get out of bed a little bit?
No.
All right. If you insist, but I'm going to try to keep it in mind for later now. It was a very difficult decision to participate in this film. The disclosure that one is HIV positive is what I would consider quintessential bad news. It's just nothing you damn well want to hear about somebody that you care about. I remember just recently I was talking with a woman at work and I was asking her about photographing, filming at work. And I said to her, you know, I'm having a real problem. I'm trying to figure out how to politically negotiate how to get the cameras to come to work so that they can film me, because they're doing a documentary about HIV positives and I'm HIV positive. It was so false and so unfair. I felt so, after I said that and I saw the reaction of my coworker, whom I love, she cried, her eyes filled with tears. And I realized that it's such bad news. You have to say, sit down, you know, I've got something to tell you. That is a big deal. I mean, it's not how I want to, you know, choose to live my life. You know, there's so many good things happening. I don't want to give people bad news. That's not my personality.
So is this a solution to get it all over with at once and tell everybody in one fell swoop?
I'm hoping nobody sees the program. I mean, that's my hope. My hope is that, you know, the night that this is on is a blackout in New York City, or the Super Bowl, or, you know, something really worthwhile is on the TV, the Academy Awards. That'll wipe out a lot of people if they're, you know, if it's on opposite the Academy Awards. Hi, Izzy, darling. Izzy's going to be a star in the film, too.
You just said they're making a film and he's on it.
Look.
Whoa, hey.
He is the star. He is the star. They're going to make a remake of Gone with the Wind. They want Izzy to play the Clark Gable role. And me, I guess I'll have to be Scarlett, huh? You didn't finish your applesauce? After all that trouble? It must have taken me 4 hours to make it. I don't know. I'm not. It's not a prosthesis, and it's not a denture, and it's not on the list.
You will have to tape
Jewelry removed.
Yes, you have to tape it.
I'll tape it.
You
Okay.
have to tape them down.
Taped. Tit rings taped. They don't have one for that. All clothing removed. I'm going to write tit rings, nipple rings, bilateral nipple rings.
Bilateral.
Bilateral.
Rings.
Nipple rings, yeah. And what do I do? Cloth tape for that?
Tape, yeah. You have to tape them into place.
I made a very conscious decision that AIDS was not going to kill me. I decided I was going to drink myself to death.
You were going to get hit, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I'd be damned if I was going to succumb to this damn disease. I would go out laughing and enjoying myself, and I would drink, and drink, and drink, and drink.
Was it fun?
For a while. And then it became not fun. Just not fun at all. And
what was Delmer's participation in this, if any?
he's done pretty much the same thing. Pretty much the same thing. In fact, there before we quit drinking, he had decided he wanted to become a bartender so he could drink all the mistakes that he could make. I mean, it's funny now, but I was different than my wife. Now, she wanted to read, when she found out she was positive, she wanted to read everything concerning this. She wanted to know, and it's been a great help to me and my doctor. But she wanted to read everything, and I didn't even want to hear the word. I didn't want to hear it on TV. I didn't want to see it on TV. I didn't want to see it in the paper. I mean, denial. I'd shut the TV off. Come on, you know.
You find out this information and you're crushed. You crumble, you know. And then you talk to people, kind of put yourself back together. And then once you're kind of sort of back together, that's when you get courage.
And what would you call your first act of courage?
Going to the group.
What was that like? Tell me about it. Why was it courageous?
Because I was actually doing something about this. I could have just sat at home, not tell anybody forever. Not tell anybody forever.
I think most of the hard moments that I've had are having to explain to my daughter what I have.
How did you do that?
I sat her down, and I had taped a number of AIDS specials that were done for children on television. And we watched them. And afterwards I said, do you understand, that I'm HIV positive, which this is what it means. And also, we have a lot of friends who are also infected, so there's a lot of AIDS talk around the house. And I said, and yes, and she asked me, does this person have it? Does this person have it? And I'd say, yes, does my dad have it? And I said, no, Billy doesn't have it. And that was really hard, because for her, it meant that she had to confront the fact that maybe I won't be here forever. And I had to confront the fact that maybe, I won't get to see her do things that normally maybe I would have.
I think as my body began to change in small ways, as I developed rashes here and there that would come and inexplicably go away, as my eyes would sometimes get very red for no reason, or my skin would seem sort of strange to me compared to how it had been. I realized that there was a metamorphosis going on here, and obviously going on internally and now beginning to manifest itself externally. And that became harder. That became harder to deal with.
I was mad about things like why did I have to have so many friends? Why do I have to be in so many things? Or what are these people going to do when they find out? Because I was close to so many people. And all I could think about was losing those people. And the one thing that scared me most was about my church. One of the deacons at our church came and picked up me and my son and my daughter for a barbecue. So we go over their house, and boy, this really hurts because when I think back on it. So we're over there and we're all sitting around the table, and the kids are fighting about they want some more Kool-Aid, okay? And they don't know whose cup is whose. And they're fighting, but no, that's my cup, that's my cup. So the hostess, who I'm sitting next to, Kelly Sonoda, says, would y'all stop fighting over that cup? It don't matter who drinks out the cup. Ain't nobody around here got no AIDS. And boy, and poor Kelly, my daughter, she froze. And she was just completely, I could see, just completely, I could see where you could see something was wrong. And so they distract them from noticing her reaction. I called the attention of one of the kids that were running out of the gate. And the little kid saw her, she's going out the gate. But, boy, that went right through me like a knife.
It was hard for me to keep it hidden, you know. I was going through a lot of turmoil with everybody, you know.
Juan had a perfect Army record until he tested positive. Distraught by the news and the need to keep it secret, he got into a terrible fight outside the canteen and was sentenced to the brig.
It wasn't like that. As soon as I got there the next day, man, people would ask me, you know. I remember this guy asking me, are you gay, you know? And I'm like, why? You know, and he didn't want to say nothing. There was guys screaming from the cells under me, you know. You know, they got somebody upstairs with AIDS, and they got faggots in here, and this and that, right?
What'd you say?
Nothing.
Was the only reason that you kept it secret, the HIV secret, because you were afraid of that there would be violence, or were you afraid just what people would think?
Part of it is what they would think, yes. That worried me a lot.
What? Talk to me about that.
That they'd think I was a whore, you know. That I was asleep about, you know. Things like that. And I certainly didn't want it reflecting back on my girls who were still living here at home. I figured life was tough enough without, you know, having other people judge them because of their mother's, what probably would be considered promiscuous behavior. And I wasn't like that.
Did you ever blame yourself for being positive?
Possibly for a while, I suppose. Eventually, I guess, yeah. I think, if we're all honest, I think those of us that are living with this disease, I think we all probably somewhere try to examine, well, gee, do I really deserve this? I think it's probably human nature.
I have a lot of friends who share with me what a positive and beautiful and grateful experience it is for them. They all work with AIDS, and they're doing a lot of great work. And there's a part of me that doesn't feel sometimes that grateful. I don't feel so, I feel like I was doing a good job before. And there's definitely a part that feels like this anger at God. There's this part that comes up, my gift of my Catholic upbringing, where all I think for myself is that, God, wasn't I doing it good enough? You know, what was I doing wrong? Where it still can feel sometimes like a punishment. It can still feel sometimes like a judgment.
One of the fears that I have now is that, and one of the things I try to do now, I try to keep as many people as possible now from being bothered with Jared. People always trying to hold him when I have him at church. Or, you know, if he's a little sick, I'll leave him home. But a lot of Sundays I have to take him with me. They want to pick him up and hug him and kiss him. And I try to hold back from that because I'm afraid that when some of them find out, they're going to say, well, she should have told me so I could have made a choice whether I wanted to hug him and kiss him. She should have, someone might be scared because of their uneducation about it. And they're going to be real mad at me about that. They're going to be upset that I didn't tell them because maybe they had the right to know because we are all so close. You know, we hug every Sunday. And some of them are going to have, it's going to be a legitimate fear with them.
Is it legitimate since they can't get AIDS that way?
Oh, there you go. You got me. You're right. But they don't know that. They don't know that.
One thing is clear. I want the time I've left here to be my time. But how do you live in a room with a monster? How do you just go about your life? I tried denying his presence, but I kept bumping into the beast. And now that I fully admit he's here, I worry I'll become obsessed, jumping at his every twitch and move. Is there a balance between denial and obsession? The only answer is to coexist with this monster. Learn how to eat out of the same bowl.
Yeah.
Say a word.
You can even say a word if you want. Sit on this side. He's talking about how you met.
Okay.
Okay, I'm up to the part about when I was feeding you and telling you my life history. On my way to work, I would drive up to the place that she was staying at.
Which was a girl's home.
Yeah, and she would look out the window and I'd look at her and I'd wave and stuff like that.
So you're already flirting.
Yeah, flirting. That's you could call it that.
Who flirted the most?
She did.
You both agree.
After I got out of the group home, I didn't have any other place to stay. Everybody was kicking me out, and so the last time I got kicked out, I was living with a friend. She was gonna move, and I had to go. So he decided to take me to his mother's house. Stay over there.
My mom, she's pretty understanding,
Was she?
Yeah. She had a small apartment herself, but yet, she still wanted to help.
And how long have you had this place? Is this the first place you had together?
Yes.
Heaven?
Yeah, heaven.
It's hard.
We met initially, and it was kind of, I guess, love at first sight at kind of the premier dance palace of gay New York, the Saint. There was this gorgeous blonde standing there with this huge smile, and it was one of these like, whoa, where did you come from? And he noticed me and kind of smiled at me. And, during that whole show, I kept like every now and then looking back and catching his eye, and he would smile or wink and
Eric and Scott didn't meet that night. But by coincidence, several months later, a mutual friend introduced them.
When I came, back, I called him up and asked him to go out to dinner alone. And, it was the first time we had been together in a dating kind of situation. And we spent the night together. And from then on, we were in love. And the irony of it all was that 6 weeks later, Scott was diagnosed with AIDS. He said, look, there's something I want to tell you. I got the results back from the doctor today, even though he'd really gotten them back on Friday, and told me, it was definite that he had AIDS. And we sat in the park, and I cried my eyes out, and he tried to reassure me, which that was Scott.
I had waited all those years we had been together, almost 9 years, before I even finally gave him this son. And he was so happy to have one. And then for him to be sick. And I felt like that because I was the one that was positive,